Your biggest obstacles aren't real. They're just well-rehearsed thoughts keeping you small. It's time to kill your limits and claim the life you're meant for. Kill Your Limits. Audiobook. Introduction. Every day, millions of capable people live beneath invisible ceilings of their own creation. These ceilings manifest in the moment of hesitation before speaking up in meetings, despite having valuable insights to share. They surface in the subtle self-talk that whispers, "Not yet," or "Someone else would be better" when opportunities arise. They appear in the countless small ways you rationalize staying within your comfort zone, even as your deeper self yearns for more. These limitations feel as solid as concrete walls, yet they exist solely in thought. Like a sophisticated computer program running in the background, negative thinking operates as your mind's default operating system. Invisible yet influential, silent yet supremely powerful in shaping your reality. This mental framework filters your experiences, defines your possibilities, and ultimately determines the boundaries of your life. You might recognize this pattern. A new opportunity emerges that aligns perfectly with your aspirations. Your initial excitement quickly gives way to doubt. What if I'm not qualified enough? What if I fail? What if others judge me? These thoughts feel like rational concerns, but they're actually well-worn neural pathways, directing you away from growth and back toward the familiar confines of your comfort zone. The truth is, most people never question these mental constructs. They accept their limitations as fixed realities, never realizing that these barriers exist only because they believe in them. It's akin to a bird that has lived so long in a cage that it believes flight is impossible, even after the door stands wide open. This book introduces the KILL framework: knowledge, interruption, liberation, legacy, a comprehensive approach to dismantling these self-imposed limitations. Through knowledge, you'll develop awareness of how your mind constructs these invisible prisons. With interruption, you'll learn to catch limiting thoughts before they gain momentum. Through liberation, you'll discover how to replace restrictive thinking with expansive possibilities. Finally, legacy reveals how your transformed perspective naturally elevates those around you. This journey won't be easy. Rewiring thought patterns that have been reinforced over years or decades requires dedication and persistence. But unlike many challenges you face, this one offers a unique advantage. The limitations you're working to overcome aren't actually real. They're sophisticated illusions. Powerful ones, certainly, but illusions nonetheless. As you progress through these chapters, you'll discover that killing your limits isn't about becoming someone new. Rather, it's about removing the artificial constraints that have prevented you from fully expressing who you already are. The person you dream of becoming isn't someone you need to create. It's someone you need to uncover by stripping away the layers of limitation you've accumulated over time. Your journey toward unlimited thinking begins now. The cage door stands open. The question is, are you ready to rediscover your wings? Chapter 1. The Stories We Live By. You're trapped in a room, heart racing as you search frantically for an escape. The walls seem to close in as you test every possible exit, growing increasingly desperate. Then, in a moment of clarity, you reach for a door handle and discover something stunning. It was unlocked all along. Every single door in this room has been unlocked from the beginning. Your imprisonment wasn't in the physical barriers, but in your absolute certainty that escape was impossible. This scenario parallels a profound truth about human limitation. What binds us most powerfully isn't our circumstances, but our certainty about what those circumstances mean. Your brain is fundamentally a meaning-making machine. constantly weaving narratives to explain your experiences, capabilities, and place in the world. These stories become the invisible architecture of your life, defining what you believe is possible or impossible for you. The human brain prioritizes coherent narratives over accuracy. When faced with any experience, it rapidly constructs explanations that feel true, regardless of their actual validity. Neuroscience shows this process begins in milliseconds, long before conscious thought engages. Your mind would rather have a coherent story that limits you than sit with the discomfort of uncertainty. These narratives form early and run deep. Cultural messages, childhood experiences, and particularly impactful moments become the raw material from which your mind constructs its fundamental beliefs about reality. A single negative comment from a teacher about your academic ability might crystallize into a lifelong story about your intelligence. A parent's well-intentioned warning about financial security might become the foundation of a narrative that keeps you trapped in an unfulfilling career. The challenge in questioning these stories lies in their invisibility. They don't feel like stories at all. They feel like reality itself. Suggesting that your limitations might be self-imposed narratives can feel threatening, even offensive. After all, these stories have organized your entire understanding of yourself and the world. They've become the water you swim in, so pervasive you've stopped noticing their presence. Consider the map maker who refuses to update their charts despite clear evidence that landscapes have changed. They cling to outdated representations, not because they're accurate, but because they're familiar. Similarly, you might maintain limiting narratives about your capabilities, your worth, or what's possible for someone like you, not because these stories serve you, but because they've become comfortable in their familiarity. Your mind continually filters experience through these established narratives, selectively perceiving evidence that confirms them while dismissing contradictory information. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Your stories shape what you notice, and what you notice reinforces your stories. The result is a prison of perception that feels absolutely real, yet exists entirely in thought. Recognizing these dynamics marks the first step toward freedom. Your stories about what you can achieve, who you can become, and what's possible in your life are interpretations, not facts. They're maps of reality, not reality itself. This distinction contains tremendous power. If your limitations exist primarily in thought, changing your thoughts can literally change what's possible in your life. This isn't about positive thinking or denying reality. It's about recognizing that what you've been calling reality is actually a story, one version among many possible interpretations of your experiences and capabilities. This recognition opens the door to transformation by revealing that the walls constraining your life might be as imaginary as the locked doors in our opening scenario. The stories currently shaping your life didn't arise by conscious choice. They formed gradually through the complex interplay of experience, interpretation, and reinforcement. But while you didn't choose your initial narratives, you can choose to examine them now. You can begin to notice the invisible scripts running in your mind, questioning whether they reflect genuine limitations or merely inherited beliefs about what's possible. These narratives took root in your earliest experiences, strengthened by every seeming confirmation. Until they became so familiar, you stopped seeing them as stories at all. They became the lens through which you view everything. Your capabilities, your future, your very identity. But just as a lens can distort as much as it reveals, these unconscious stories might be showing you a warped version of what's actually possible. The profound truth is that you don't have to remain bound by narratives you never consciously chose. You have the power to shine a light on these hidden assumptions and ask yourself, is this really true, or is it just what I've always believed? Chapter 2: The Invisible Architect. Your mind operates like an architect, silently designing the structure of your experience. Imagine waking up in an unfamiliar house where every element seems deliberately crafted to restrict your movement. The doorways are slightly too low, forcing you to stoop. The chairs are uncomfortable, discouraging you from settling in. The windows are positioned just high enough to limit your view of the outside world. As you navigate this space, you gradually realize these constraints aren't random. They're intentional design choices by an architect who has been invisibly shaping your environment all along, your own mind. This architectural metaphor illuminates how unconscious thought patterns continuously construct the boundaries of your experience. Just as a building's design influences how people move through space, your mental architecture determines how you move through life. These thought patterns aren't random. They're sophisticated systems developed through evolution and experience to keep you safe and functional. Your brain's primary directive is survival, not fulfillment. Through millions of years of evolution, it developed highly sensitive threat detection systems that err on the side of caution. This ancient wiring combines with your personal history to create unique patterns of protective thinking. Early experiences, particularly challenging ones, become blueprints for future expectations. A single incident of public embarrassment might lead to a lifetime of avoiding the spotlight. One significant rejection could result in architectural features designed to prevent future vulnerability. These mental constructions feel normal because they've been your reality for so long. Like someone who has lived their entire life in a home with low ceilings, you've adapted to duck your head without even thinking about it. The limitations feel like facts rather than choices. Not architectural decisions, but immutable laws of nature. Consider how these patterns manifest. The inner critic that immediately highlights potential failures isn't a truth teller, but an overzealous safety inspector. The habit of catastrophizing, jumping to worst-case scenarios, isn't realistic planning but a defensive design feature. The compulsion to compare yourself to others isn't a valid measurement system but a distorted window through which you view your worth. What makes these patterns particularly challenging to recognize is their invisibility. You don't see them as design choices because you're viewing life through them. It's similar to wearing someone else's prescription glasses. The distortion becomes your normal way of seeing. You might even defend these limitations as necessary features rather than recognizing them as outdated safety measures. The crucial insight is that these thought patterns, while persistent, aren't permanent fixtures. They're learned responses that can be unlearned, architectural elements that can be redesigned once you become aware of them. Your mind isn't a fixed structure but a dynamic space capable of renovation and expansion. Becoming aware of your mental architecture requires developing sensitivity to certain indicators. Notice moments when your energy suddenly depletes, as if walking into a room with poor ventilation. Pay attention when you automatically reject opportunities. These are like doorways you've been conditioned to avoid. Listen for limiting statements about what's possible. These are the invisible walls you've accepted as permanent boundaries. The architecture of your mind was designed with one primary goal: to protect you from harm. But in its zealous pursuit of safety, it may have created a structure that limits more than it protects. The question isn't whether these protective patterns exist. They do in everyone's mind. But whether the current design still serves your highest potential. By developing awareness of your mental architecture, you begin the process of conscious redesign. This doesn't mean demolishing all protective features. Some constraints serve valuable purposes. Instead, it means examining each element with fresh eyes, questioning whether it still serves your current needs and aspirations. Think of it as renovating a house you've lived in for years. Some rooms need complete transformation, while others simply require better lighting or improved flow. Your fear of public speaking might have protected you from social anxiety as a child, but now it blocks career advancement. Your tendency to avoid conflict may have helped navigate difficult family dynamics, but now it prevents you from advocating for your needs. The goal isn't to tear down every wall, but to create a space that amplifies your potential rather than containing it. Chapter 3. The 4 Pillars of Limitation. Your potential stands before you like a magnificent structure, its soaring heights reaching toward possibilities you've barely dared to imagine. Yet supporting this vast potential are 4 deceptive pillars, each one constructed entirely of thought, yet appearing as solid as marble: unworthiness, powerlessness, isolation, and meaninglessness. These pillars have stood for so long they seem permanent, fundamental, even necessary. But they are merely inherited architecture, passed down through generations of human experience. The pillar of unworthiness rises first, perhaps the most familiar of all. It manifests in those moments when achievement brings no satisfaction, when praise rings hollow because you're certain you don't deserve it. This column supports the weight of perfectionism, that relentless drive for an impossible standard that transforms every success into evidence of what's still lacking. It feeds the persistent whisper of imposter syndrome, convincing you that any moment now, everyone will discover the truth. You're not qualified, not prepared, not enough. Beside it stands powerlessness, equally imposing but more subtle in its influence. This pillar reveals itself in the countless times you've said, "I can't," before truly trying, in the projects left unfinished, in the opportunities declined. It manifests as procrastination, that peculiar form of self-sabotage where you postpone action until circumstances force your hand, allowing you to attribute any failure to lack of time rather than lack of capability. When success does come, this pillar ensures you credit luck or timing, never your own agency or skill. The 3rd pillar, isolation, casts its shadow over your relationships and connections. It's present in every moment you hold back from authentic expression, every time you maintain a carefully curated image, rather than risk being truly seen. This column sustains the exhausting practice of chronic comparison, keeping you perpetually outside looking in at others who seem to have it all figured out. It reinforces the belief that your experience is uniquely difficult, that no one could possibly understand your struggles. Finally, meaninglessness completes the structure, perhaps the most insidious pillar of all. It questions the value of every endeavor, suggesting that even if you overcome all other limitations, perhaps none of it truly matters. This pillar feeds the existential boredom that can make even success feel hollow, the creeping sense that you're going through motions without purpose or impact. These pillars perform a paradoxical function. They were originally constructed as protection, a way to manage the overwhelming complexity of existence. Unworthiness protects you from the risks of overreach and social rejection. Powerlessness shielded you from the responsibility of your own potential. Isolation preserves you from the vulnerabilities of deep connection. Meaninglessness offered refuge from the weight of purpose and the fear of failure. Yet what began as protection has become prison. Like a bird raised in captivity, You've grown so accustomed to these limitations that they feel like safety, like home, like an essential part of who you are. The space between these pillars has become your comfort zone, and anything beyond them registers as threat rather than opportunity. But here's the revelation that changes everything. These pillars are made entirely of thought. Despite their apparent solidity, they are constructed of beliefs, assumptions, and interpretations, all of which can be examined, questioned, and ultimately transformed. They persist not through any inherent strength, but through the power of unconscious acceptance. The moment you begin to see them clearly is the moment they begin to lose their hold. In examining these 4 pillars, you may recognize that certain ones dominate your mental architecture more than others. Some may feel like solid granite, while others appear as mere shadows. This recognition is crucial because it reveals where your work of transformation must begin. The pillars that feel most substantial, most unquestionable, are precisely the ones requiring your closest attention. Looking at your life through the lens of these 4 pillars brings clarity to patterns that may have seemed random or inevitable. Each limitation in your experience can be traced back to one or more of these fundamental constraints. The procrastination that's holding back your career, the relationships that never seem to deepen, the dreams you've talked yourself out of pursuing, all can be mapped to these underlying structures. When you map your struggles against these pillars, what emerges isn't just understanding, but opportunity. That promotion you've convinced yourself is out of reach, the creative project gathering dust in your drawer, the bold move you've been too afraid to make. Each connects directly to how these pillars shape your perception of what's possible. By seeing these connections clearly, you gain access to the precise points where transformation becomes possible. Your limitations aren't scattered obstacles, but interconnected shadows cast by these 4 fundamental beliefs. Chapter 4. The Shadow Cost. Picture someone meticulously counting pennies and nickels, completely absorbed in their modest collection, while unnoticed, precious diamonds slip through holes in their pockets with every movement. Their intense focus on what they lack blinds them to the abundance already within their grasp, creating a tragic irony that plays out moment by moment. This scene mirrors the profound cost of limiting thoughts, a price so pervasive yet subtle that most never recognize its true magnitude. While you diligently monitor perceived shortcomings, invaluable opportunities for growth, connection, and achievement silently slip away. The creative cost accumulates in moments of hesitation, when ideas spark but never ignite into action. Studies in neuroscience reveal that the brain's creative centers actually diminish in activity when constrained by negative self-talk. Innovation requires the courage to explore uncharted territory, yet limiting thoughts construct invisible boundaries that keep you circling familiar ground. The voice that whispers, "You're not talented enough," doesn't just discourage specific projects. It gradually reshapes your neural pathways, making creativity feel increasingly foreign and uncomfortable. In relationships, the toll compounds through missed connections and unopened hearts. Research in interpersonal psychology demonstrates how self-limiting beliefs create subtle behavioral patterns that push away potential deep connections. When you believe yourself fundamentally unworthy of love, you unconsciously emit signals that confirm this belief, maintaining emotional distance, deflecting genuine compliments, or sabotaging budding relationships before they can challenge your narrative of unworthiness. The opportunity cost manifests in paths not taken, risks not embraced, and growth not experienced. Each time limiting thoughts convince you to stay in your comfort zone, you sacrifice potential futures that could have expanded your understanding of what's possible. These abandoned possibilities don't disappear. They accumulate into a shadow life of unrealized potential. Perhaps most concrete are the physical costs, documented through decades of psychoneuroimmunology research. Chronic negative thinking triggers sustained stress responses that compromise immune function, increase inflammation, and accelerate cellular aging. Your body literally pays the price for mental limitation through reduced resilience, decreased energy, and increased susceptibility to illness. Like a garden where weeds receive careful attention while flowers wither from neglect, your mind's focus determines what thrives. Every moment spent reinforcing limiting beliefs represents energy diverted from nurturing your potential. This misallocation of mental resources creates an opportunity cost that compounds over time. The more attention devoted to limitation, the less available for recognizing and acting on possibilities. What makes these costs particularly insidious is their gradual accumulation. No single moment of negative thinking appears catastrophic, yet like water wearing away stone, the cumulative effect reshapes the landscape of your life. You don't wake up one morning having lost all creativity or connection. Instead, these capacities slowly atrophy through persistent undernourishment. Yet these costs, however substantial, remain optional. Research in neuroplasticity proves that mental patterns can be redirected at any moment, creating new neural pathways that support expansion rather than limitation. Each instance of awareness offers a choice point, an opportunity to redirect attention from familiar limitations toward unexplored possibilities. Consider how many diamonds have already slipped through the holes in your pockets while you focused on counting pennies. What creative expressions have withered before blooming? Which relationships remained surface level when they could have transformed your understanding of love? What adventures were abandoned before they began? How has your physical vitality been compromised by the steady drip of limiting thoughts? The reflection exercise that follows represents an accounting of these shadow costs, not to induce regret, but to illuminate the gravity of limiting thoughts and fuel genuine motivation for change. What awakens is not guilt over past choices, but clarity about the price of remaining unconscious to these patterns. By shining a light on these hidden expenses, you'll see how seemingly innocuous thoughts accumulate into massive opportunity costs over time. This isn't about beating yourself up over roads not taken. It's about recognizing the full impact of your mental habits, so you can make different choices moving forward. When you truly grasp the magnitude of what limiting beliefs have already cost, maintaining those same patterns becomes far more painful than the discomfort of change. Chapter 5. The Comfort of Limitation. In a world where freedom and expansion seem universally desirable, a peculiar paradox emerges. Imagine someone who has lived in a tiny, cramped apartment for decades being offered a beautiful mansion at no cost. This magnificent home promises space, luxury, and the fulfillment of long-held dreams. Yet, as the opportunity presents itself, they begin finding endless reasons to reject it. The maintenance would be overwhelming. The space would feel too empty. The neighborhood might be unfamiliar. The commute could change. Despite the clear advantages of moving, they ultimately choose to remain in their confined but familiar space. This scenario illuminates a fundamental truth about human psychology. We often cling to our limitations not because they serve us, but because they feel safe. The cramped apartment of negative thinking, despite its obvious disadvantages, provides a predictable environment where expectations are managed and surprises are minimal. The safety of low expectations operates as a psychological defense mechanism. When you constantly anticipate negative outcomes, you create an illusion of control over disappointment. Research in cognitive psychology demonstrates that the brain processes anticipated pain differently than unexpected pain, suggesting that we'd rather embrace a known discomfort than risk an unknown outcome, even if that outcome might be positive. This attachment to limitation manifests in the subtle ways you might sabotage opportunities for growth. You might find yourself downplaying achievements to avoid raising expectations, declining opportunities that could lead to expansion, or maintaining relationships that reinforce your limiting beliefs. These behaviors aren't random. They're sophisticated strategies for maintaining psychological comfort, even at the cost of potential fulfillment. Identity continuation presents another powerful force binding you to familiar constraints. Your limiting beliefs, however painful, have become integrated into your self-concept. They provide a consistent narrative about who you are and what's possible for you. Challenging these beliefs threatens not just your thoughts, but your very sense of self. The prospect of becoming someone new, even someone more capable and fulfilled, can trigger deep resistance because it requires letting go of the identity you've carefully constructed. Perhaps most insidiously, limitation offers the relief of reduced responsibility. When you believe success is impossible, you're absolved from the demanding work of pursuing it. This comfort mechanism protects you from the vulnerability of trying and potentially failing, but it also prevents you from discovering your true capabilities. It's easier to declare something impossible than to face the uncertainty of attempting it. The relationship with limitation often mirrors that of a prisoner who has decorated their cell so thoroughly that the prospect of freedom becomes threatening. You may have adapted to your constraints, finding ways to make them feel like home. You've learned where every piece of furniture fits in your cramped apartment of negative thinking, and the thought of rearranging everything in a mansion of possibility creates genuine anxiety. However, this comfort is ultimately an illusion, a trade-off where you exchange the discomfort of growth for the familiarity of constraint. True comfort isn't found in the predictability of limitation, but in the expansive freedom of possibility. While growth initially feels threatening, it eventually provides a deeper security than any constraint could offer. The security of knowing you can handle whatever comes, that you're capable of adapting and thriving in new circumstances. The critical shift occurs when you recognize that your attachment to limitation isn't a personal failing, but a natural psychological response to uncertainty. This understanding creates space for compassionate examination of your resistance to change. It allows you to acknowledge the legitimate comfort you've found in familiar constraints, while recognizing that this comfort comes at an unsustainable cost. Scientists studying behavioral change have observed that awareness of resistance often precedes meaningful transformation. When you understand what your limiting beliefs provide, whether it's protection from disappointment, identity continuity, or reduced responsibility, you can consciously develop new strategies for meeting these needs without sacrificing growth. Your relationship with limitation is complex, built on layers of past experiences and learned responses. Like the person hesitating at the threshold of their new mansion, you stand at the boundary between familiar constraint and unknown possibility. Understanding the comfort mechanisms that keep you tethered to limitation is the first step toward choosing a different response, one that honors your need for security while embracing the adventure of growth. These patterns of limitation didn't develop overnight. They emerged gradually through countless small moments when uncertainty felt threatening and familiar boundaries offered refuge. Each time you retreated to the safety of what you knew, these patterns grew stronger, more automatic, until they become your default way of engaging with life's challenges. Yet within this very understanding lies the seed of transformation. Recognizing how these protective patterns formed reveals they can be reshaped with equal intention and care. Chapter 6: The Liberation Mindset. When two mountain climbers encounter an unexpected storm on their ascent, their divergent responses reveal a profound truth about human perception. While identical weather conditions confront them both, their experiences could not be more different. The first climber's mind immediately constructs a narrative of danger and defeat, cataloging all possible disasters that could unfold. Their body tenses, their breathing becomes shallow, and their capabilities diminish as stress hormones flood their system. The second climber's mind engages differently, seeing the same challenging conditions, but perceiving them through a lens of adaptation and growth. Their attention turns to available resources, possible routes, and necessary adjustments. This stark contrast illuminates how your mindset shapes not just your interpretation of events, but your actual lived experience of them. The liberation mindset isn't about denying challenges or maintaining artificial positivity. Instead, it represents a fundamental shift toward accurate perception, seeing reality without the distorting filters of fear-based projection or habitual negativity. At its core, the liberation mindset operates through present moment awareness. When you're fully present, you respond to what's actually happening rather than getting lost in catastrophic projections about what might occur. This awareness creates space between stimulus and response, allowing you to choose your interpretation rather than defaulting to conditioned patterns of limitation. Cognitive flexibility forms another crucial element of this mindset. Just as a skilled martial artist maintains loose joints ready to respond in any direction, the liberated mind remains supple enough to perceive multiple possibilities in any situation. This flexibility doesn't mean ignoring potential dangers or difficulties. It means maintaining the capacity to see beyond them to available opportunities and solutions. Comfort with uncertainty emerges as a vital component of liberated thinking. The mind that demands absolute certainty before taking action will always remain trapped within the walls of the known. By developing a healthy relationship with uncertainty, you expand your field of possible action beyond the narrow confines of guaranteed outcomes. Perhaps most importantly, the liberation mindset cultivates responsibility, focusing attention on what can be influenced rather than what cannot. Like a sailor working with changing winds, this mindset engages with conditions as they are, while maintaining awareness of how to adjust course toward desired outcomes. Society often reinforces limitation as realism, creating subtle pressure to view negative projections as more mature or sophisticated than expansive thinking. This cultural conditioning can make the liberation mindset feel naive or unrealistic despite its greater accuracy. Yet reality consistently demonstrates that those who maintain flexible, engaged thinking often perceive opportunities and solutions invisible to minds trapped in rigid negativity. This liberated perception naturally extends into every domain of life. In professional settings, it allows you to perceive challenges as opportunities for innovation rather than insurmountable obstacles. In relationships, it enables you to see beyond surface conflicts to deeper possibilities for connection and understanding. In personal growth, it transforms perceived limitations into fascinating edges for expansion. The most profound revelation about the liberation mindset is that it isn't something you need to achieve. It represents your natural state of perception beneath accumulated layers of fearful thinking. Like clearing dust from a window, developing this mindset involves removing distortions rather than adding new capabilities. Through consistent cultivation of cognitive flexibility, you can train your mind to perceive multiple perspectives in challenging situations. Rather than immediately constructing limiting narratives, you learn to ask empowering questions that expand perception. What opportunities might this situation contain? What resources haven't I considered? What becomes possible if I approach this differently? This fundamental shift from rigid limitation to flexible engagement creates the foundation for sustainable transformation. Like those two mountain climbers facing the same storm, your experience of life's challenges transforms not because circumstances change, but because you develop the capacity to perceive and engage with them differently. This fundamental shift from rigid limitation to flexible engagement creates the foundation for sustainable transformation. Like those two mountain climbers facing the same storm, your experience of life's challenges transforms not because circumstances change, but because you develop the capacity to perceive and engage with them differently. The beauty of this transformation lies in its permanence. Once you understand that perception shapes reality, you gain access to an unlimited source of power. Every obstacle becomes an invitation to practice this new way of seeing. Each setback offers a chance to flex your growing capacity for creative engagement. Even moments of doubt serve as opportunities to strengthen your commitment to this expanded perspective. You're not just learning a new skill, you're awakening an innate ability that has always existed within you. This is the profound difference between temporary motivation and lasting transformation. While motivation pushes you to overcome obstacles through sheer force of will, transformation allows you to navigate challenges with natural grace and wisdom. Chapter 7. The Moment of Power. Think of a speeding train approaching a critical junction. In those fleeting moments before momentum carries it past the turning point, a simple switch can alter its entire trajectory. This image captures the essence of pattern interruption, those crucial instants between stimulus and response, where you can redirect the course of negative thinking. Your brain operates through neural pathways strengthened by repetition. Each time you engage in a particular thought pattern, you reinforce these neural connections, making them more likely to activate in similar future situations. However, these patterns aren't instantaneous. They unfold across microseconds, creating brief windows of opportunity for intervention. Modern neuroscience reveals that thought patterns follow predictable sequences of activation. When a trigger event occurs, it initiates a cascade of neural firing that, if left uninterrupted, completes the familiar circuit of negative thinking. Yet between the initial trigger and the full activation lies a space, small but significant, where conscious intervention can redirect the pattern. Your body offers subtle signals before negative thinking takes full control. A slight tension in your shoulders, a shift in your breathing pattern, a flutter in your stomach. These physical sensations often precede the complete activation of limiting thoughts. Like a musician who learns to detect the slightest discord in a familiar piece, you can develop sensitivity to these early warning signs. This sensitivity becomes your early detection system. When you notice these indicators, you stand at that critical junction where the track can still be switched. The key isn't eliminating negative thoughts entirely, an impossible and counterproductive goal. Instead, success lies in recognizing the space between stimulus and response, that moment of power where choice becomes possible. Consider how your nervous system responds to perceived threats. The initial recognition happens in milliseconds, but the full stress response takes longer to cascade through your body. In this gap between recognition and reaction lies your opportunity for intervention. The effectiveness of pattern interruption varies among individuals and situations. Some respond best to physical interventions, a change in posture, a deep breath, or movement that breaks the physiological component of the pattern. Others find power in verbal interruptions, specific phrases that halt the momentum of negative thinking. Still others benefit most from immediate perspective shifts that reframe situations before limitation takes hold. The key is identifying your personal triggers and optimal interruption methods. Notice which situations consistently activate limiting thoughts. Pay attention to how these patterns manifest in your body. Observe which interruption techniques feel most natural and effective for you. Your power to interrupt negative patterns grows stronger with awareness. Each time you successfully redirect a limiting thought, you weaken the old neural pathway while strengthening new, more empowering connections. This isn't about perfection. It's about increasing your moments of conscious choice. The goal isn't to never experience negative thoughts. Rather, it's to recognize them early, interrupt their momentum, and redirect your mental energy toward more constructive patterns. Like that train approaching the junction, your thoughts carry tremendous momentum. But with awareness and skillful intervention, you can alter their course before they carry you down familiar tracks of limitation. Understanding pattern interruption reveals that freedom from limiting thoughts isn't about eliminating them. It's about recognizing and using those crucial moments of choice. Your power lies not in avoiding negative thinking, but in developing the awareness and skill to redirect it when it arises. As you practice pattern interruption, you'll discover that these moments of intervention become more apparent and accessible. What once felt like instantaneous, inevitable responses begin to reveal their component parts. The trigger, the gap, and the choice point where you can redirect your mental trajectory toward more empowering possibilities. This awareness and skill become particularly valuable during challenging situations, when limiting thoughts tend to arise with greater frequency and intensity. By understanding the mechanics of pattern interruption, you transform these challenges into opportunities for practicing conscious redirection of your mental energy. In moments of stress, uncertainty, or pressure, your heightened sensitivity to thought patterns allows you to catch negative spirals earlier before they gain momentum. What might have previously overwhelmed you becomes a powerful training ground, where each difficult circumstance strengthens your ability to navigate your mental landscape with greater precision and purpose. Chapter 8. The Question That Liberates. Picture someone frantically trying various keys in a lock, anxiety mounting with each failed attempt, certain they're trapped, only to discover the door was never locked at all. The limitation existed purely in their mind, an assumption so convincing it created a very real experience of constraint. This scenario illuminates a profound truth about human consciousness. Many of our most restrictive limitations exist only as unexamined assumptions. Transformative questioning serves as your primary tool for dismantling these invisible constraints. When you encounter a limiting thought, 4 fundamental questions can create immediate shifts in perception. First, is this thought absolutely true? Forces you to confront the difference between interpretation and fact. Second, can I absolutely know it's true? Pushes deeper, revealing how even our most confident assumptions rest on incomplete information. Third, how do I react when I believe this thought? Exposes the real-world impact of accepting limitations as truth. Fourth, who would I be without this thought? Opens windows to new possibilities by removing artificial constraints. Your mind naturally resists this type of questioning. It prefers the certainty of familiar limitations over the uncertainty of expanded possibilities. This resistance often manifests as immediate justification, your thoughts rushing to defend their validity before examination can occur. This defensive response actually signals you're approaching something significant, as the mind most fiercely protects its most fundamental assumptions. Different thinking patterns respond to different types of questions. Analytical minds resonate with logical inquiries that expose inconsistencies. What evidence supports this limitation? Or, what contrary evidence am I ignoring? Emotional thinkers connect with feeling-based questions. How does believing this thought make me feel? Or, what emotions am I avoiding by maintaining this limitation? Possibility-focused questions like, what opportunities would become available if this limitation weren't true? Serve those oriented toward potential and growth. Like a jeweler examining a stone from multiple angles to reveal its true nature, these varied questions illuminate different aspects of your limiting thoughts. Each perspective offers new insights, gradually dismantling the solidity of constraints that once appeared absolute. Questions aren't merely tools for gathering information. They're gateways to entirely new territories of perception. The quality of your questions literally determines the quality of your life experience. When you ask, what else might this mean? You open yourself to interpretations beyond your habitual negative assumptions. What would I advise someone I love in this situation? Creates emotional distance that allows clearer perception. How might I view this situation 5 years from now? Provides perspective that often reveals the temporary nature of current limitations. Your most persistent limiting thoughts require customized questions tailored to their specific patterns. When faced with thoughts of inadequacy, questions like, where am I already demonstrating capability in this area? Can interrupt the pattern. For fears of failure, what's the worst that could actually happen, and could I handle that? Helps expose catastrophic thinking. Perfectionist thoughts respond to, what would good enough look like in this situation? These questions serve as pattern interruption tools, training your mind to automatically challenge negative interpretations rather than accepting them as truth. The key lies not in reaching specific answers, but in maintaining the questioning stance itself, remaining curious about your assumptions rather than convinced of their reality. Just as a scientist maintains skepticism toward initial observations, you can develop healthy doubt toward your limiting thoughts. This isn't about replacing negative thoughts with positive ones, but about discovering what's actually true beyond your habitual interpretations. Through consistent questioning, what once appeared as solid barriers gradually reveal themselves as transparent assumptions, ready to dissolve in the light of conscious examination. The room you believed was locked begins to show its true nature. The keys you've been frantically trying weren't necessary. The door yields to a simple push once you question your assumption of constraint. This revelation doesn't come through force or technique, but through the gentle yet persistent power of transformative questioning. Like shadows dissolving in morning light, your perceived barriers fade when exposed to conscious inquiry. The walls that seemed so solid, the limitations that felt so real, they begin to shimmer and shift as you recognize them as projections of unchallenged thoughts rather than concrete reality. Your prison transforms into a practice ground where each seemingly locked door invites you to examine what you've accepted as unchangeable truth. Chapter 9. The Language of Liberation. Words shape worlds. Two identical gardens planted in identical soil under identical conditions can yield dramatically different results based solely on the words spoken to them. This reality extends far beyond horticulture. Your language patterns actively construct the boundaries of your perceived possibilities. Consider how absolute terms create rigid barriers in your mind. When you declare, "I always fail at relationships," or "I never succeed in interviews," you're not merely describing past experiences, you're programming future limitations. These linguistic absolutes deny the natural variety and possibility inherent in life, creating artificial constraints that feel as solid as physical walls. Identity statements carry particular power through their implied permanence. When you say, "I am bad with money," rather than "I'm currently learning about financial management," you transform a temporary condition into a seemingly fixed aspect of your being. The simple shift from "I am" to "I currently" or "I'm learning" immediately opens space for growth and transformation. Subtle disempowerment often hides in common phrases. "I can't" suggests impossibility, while "I choose not to" or "I'm not ready to" acknowledges agency. "I should" implies external obligation, while "I want to" or "I choose to" centers your authentic desires. These slight variations in language dramatically affect your relationship with challenges and opportunities. Different domains of limitation express themselves through characteristic linguistic patterns. The vocabulary of unworthiness revolves around variations of "not enough," "not smart enough," "not qualified enough," "not experienced enough." The language of powerlessness emphasizes external causation. "They won't let me." "The situation prevents me." "I have no choice." The dialect of isolation speaks in absolutes of separation. "No one understands." "I'm the only one who," "everyone else is." Just as a translator gains new freedoms by learning another language, you can expand your possibilities by adopting new linguistic patterns. Provisional language maintains flexibility. So far. At this point, based on current information, process language acknowledges change. "I'm developing." "I'm learning." "I'm discovering." Possibility terms create openness. "What if?" "I wonder." "Perhaps." Agency expressions recognize choice. "I choose." "I prefer." "I'm deciding." Your words don't merely describe your reality, they actively construct it by directing attention and framing experience. When you say, "This always happens to me," you're not just describing a pattern, you're creating a perceptual filter that selectively notices confirming evidence while overlooking exceptions. When you declare something impossible, you remove any motivation to explore potential solutions. The power of language extends beyond conscious thought into your body's biochemical responses. Limiting language triggers stress responses, while empowering language stimulates growth hormones and positive neurochemistry. Your words literally reprogram your biology, influencing everything from immune function to physical performance. Language patterns become habitual through repetition, creating default interpretations that feel natural and inevitable. Just as negative patterns became automatic through unconscious repetition, new empowering patterns can become your default through conscious practice. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about accurate thinking that acknowledges both challenges and possibilities. Transforming your linguistic patterns requires awareness of current habits and consistent practice with alternatives. When you catch yourself using absolutes, shift to provisional language. When you notice identity statements, reframe them as temporary conditions or learning opportunities. When disempowering phrases arise, consciously choose expressions that acknowledge your agency. This transformation extends beyond self-talk to influence how you communicate with others. Your language sets the tone for relationships, shapes team dynamics, and influences how others perceive and respond to you. As you adopt more empowering patterns, you naturally create environments that support growth and possibility rather than reinforcing limitations. The key lies in recognizing that language isn't just a passive tool for describing reality. It's an active force in constructing your experience. Every word choice either reinforces existing limitations or creates openings for new possibilities. Through conscious attention to language patterns, you can literally speak yourself free from self-imposed constraints. Each phrase you utter ripples through your neural pathways, either deepening familiar ruts of limitation or carving new channels toward expansion. The words flowing through your mind and from your lips shape not only how you view the world, but how the world responds to you. This isn't mystical thinking. It's the tangible impact of language on perception, behavior, and ultimately, the reality you create moment by moment. Chapter 10. The Emotional Doorway. Your mind operates like an intricate puzzle, with thoughts and emotions interlocking in complex patterns. Yet most attempts to change negative thinking patterns ignore a crucial reality. You're trying to solve this puzzle while wearing thick gloves that numb your sensitivity to its subtle contours. These gloves represent emotional disconnection, a common adaptation in a society that often prioritizes intellectual understanding over emotional awareness. When you remove these metaphorical gloves, everything changes. Suddenly, you can feel the minute variations in the puzzle pieces, the slight tremor in your stomach before anxiety spirals into catastrophic thinking, the chest tightness that precedes self-doubt, the throat constriction that signals incoming imposter syndrome. These physical emotional signals arrive milliseconds before the corresponding thoughts, offering a brief window for intervention that most people miss entirely. Neuroscience confirms this sequence. Your emotional brain processes information and responds before your cognitive centers even receive the signal. This isn't a design flaw, it's an evolutionary advantage that can become a powerful tool for transformation when you learn to read these emotional messages accurately. Your emotional system functions like sophisticated weather tracking equipment, detecting subtle atmospheric changes before the storm of negative thinking arrives. Just as meteorologists learn to read barometric pressure drops and wind pattern shifts, you can develop the sensitivity to recognize emotional indicators that precede specific thought patterns. This isn't about controlling or suppressing emotions. Quite the opposite. Emotional awareness requires developing a more nuanced relationship with your feelings. Many have learned to override emotional signals, treating them as inconvenient interruptions rather than valuable data. This disconnection doesn't eliminate emotions. It simply removes your ability to detect their early warning signals. Your body constantly provides emotional information through physical sensations. Before anxiety manifests as catastrophic thoughts, it might appear as shallow breathing or muscle tension. Before shame triggers self-condemnation, you might notice a slight slump in posture or heat in your face. These bodily signals offer intervention opportunities before limiting thoughts gain momentum. The key lies in developing emotional literacy, learning to accurately interpret these physical emotional messages rather than misreading them through the lens of habitual thinking. When you feel that familiar throat tightness, is it really signaling danger, or is it simply energy arising that could be channeled productively? When your chest constricts, is it truly evidence of inadequacy, or is it excitement about stepping into new territory? Your emotional vocabulary plays a crucial role in this awareness. The more precise your emotional language becomes, the more accurately you can identify and respond to these signals. There's a world of difference between vague discomfort and recognizing specific emotional notes like apprehension, uncertainty, or anticipation. Tracking your emotional triggers reveals patterns in how specific situations consistently activate particular emotional thinking combinations. This isn't about analyzing past events. It's about developing real-time awareness of how emotions arise and transition into thoughts. Through careful observation, you begin recognizing the subtle shifts that precede limiting thought patterns. This sensitivity development requires consistent practice in body awareness. Regular body scanning helps identify your unique physical signatures for different emotional states. Some find tension headaches precede perfectionist thinking, while others notice stomach knots before social comparison thoughts activate. These patterns are highly individual. Your task is discovering your personal, emotional, physical language. The ultimate goal isn't to prevent negative emotions or thoughts, but to develop an early warning system that allows conscious choice in how you respond. When you can detect the emotional weather patterns forming, you gain precious moments to choose your response rather than being swept away by habitual thinking. With practice, this emotional awareness becomes automatic, a natural sensitivity to the subtle currents of your inner experience. Like removing those thick gloves from the puzzle, you develop the tactile awareness needed to work skillfully with your thoughts and emotions rather than being controlled by them. This foundation of emotional intelligence creates the conditions for successful pattern interruption. Without it, you're always operating reactively, trying to catch thought patterns that have already gained momentum. With it, you develop the capacity for early intervention, engaging with emotional signals before they crystallize into limiting thoughts. You gain the subtle awareness needed to notice the first tremors of anxiety, the initial whispers of self-doubt, or the quiet stirrings of frustration. These early warning signals become your allies, giving you precious moments to pause and redirect your mental energy before it cascades into familiar patterns of limitation. What was once an overwhelming flood becomes a manageable stream, allowing you to navigate your inner landscape with newfound grace and precision. Chapter 11. The Power of Presence. Consider someone perpetually gazing through binoculars, alternating between scenes of past regrets and future anxieties, while continually stumbling over the opportunities and beauty directly at their feet. This constant mental time travel isn't just a distraction. It's the fertile soil where negative thinking takes root and flourishes. Your mind's tendency to project away from the present moment creates the very space where limitation grows strongest. When you're mentally rehearsing future scenarios or replaying past events, you're operating in a realm of pure thought, disconnected from the direct experience of life unfolding in the present moment. This disconnection amplifies negative thinking patterns that can only exist in mental projections, not in immediate reality. Neuroscience reveals how attention directed to immediate sensory experience activates fundamentally different brain regions than conceptual thinking. When you fully engage with present moment experience, the sensation of your breath, the feeling of your feet on the ground, the sounds in your environment, you naturally interrupt the neural circuits that maintain limiting thought patterns. This isn't merely a temporary distraction, but a profound shift in how your brain processes experience. Modern culture constantly pulls your attention away from the present moment. Between digital notifications, endless to-do lists, and societal pressure to always be planning ahead, presence has become increasingly rare. This constant future focus creates an environment where negative thinking thrives, as your mind continuously generates problems to solve and scenarios to worry about. Different personality types experience presence in unique ways. For some, presence emerges through physical awareness, the sensation of movement, breath, and bodily sensations. Others connect with presence through emotional awareness, tuning into the immediate feeling state without analysis or judgment. Still others find presence through focused mental attention, becoming completely absorbed in the task or observation at hand. This relationship between presence and negative thinking reveals a profound truth. Limiting thoughts require mental time travel. They depend on your mind's ability to project into imagined futures or recalled pasts. In the actual present moment, negative thinking has no substance. It dissolves in the face of direct experience. The present moment isn't simply one point on a timeline. It's the only place where life actually occurs. Past and future exist solely as thoughts, while reality unfolds exclusively in the now. This understanding offers a powerful key to interrupting negative patterns. By fully entering the present moment, you naturally step out of the mental space where limitation operates. 5 senses check provides an immediate anchor to present experience. When negative thinking begins to spiral, systematically noting one thing you can see, hear, feel, smell, and taste instantly breaks the pattern by engaging different neural pathways. This isn't about forcing thoughts away, but about redirecting attention to direct experience. Single-task focus eliminates the divided attention that enables limiting thoughts to persist in the background of consciousness. By fully engaging with one activity, whether washing dishes, walking, or working, you leave no mental space for negative patterns to operate. This focused attention becomes a form of meditation in action. Micro-moment appreciation trains your mind to notice beauty and value in ordinary experience. This practice counteracts the tendency of negative thinking to dismiss or devalue the present moment in favor of imagined futures or idealized pasts. By cultivating genuine appreciation for simple experiences, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of water, the comfort of a chair, you develop a natural resistance to limitation-based thinking. These approaches to presence don't require adding new activities to your day. Instead, they integrate into existing activities, transforming routine moments into opportunities for liberation from limiting patterns. Each moment of presence becomes a gateway to freedom from negative thinking, available whenever you choose to step through it. The beauty of this transformation lies in its simplicity. You already have everything you need. Your morning coffee, your commute, your lunch break. These aren't obstacles to overcome, but portals to deeper awareness. Even the most mundane tasks become powerful tools for breaking free from mental constraints when approached with full attention. You're not adding another item to your to-do list. You're discovering the hidden potential within what you're already doing. Chapter 12. The Creative Alternative. Picture a dark room where someone frantically waves their hands, desperately trying to scoop away the darkness. Their efforts grow increasingly frenzied as the darkness persists, unmoved by their struggle. Now imagine another person simply reaching for a light switch, instantly transforming the entire space, not by fighting darkness, but by introducing light. This fundamental principle reveals a profound truth about transforming negative thinking. Direct resistance often strengthens what you're trying to eliminate, while creating something new naturally displaces limitation. Your mind operates according to this same principle. When you directly fight against negative thoughts, you paradoxically strengthen their grip by focusing attention on what you don't want. Yet when you engage in creative activity, you naturally interrupt limiting patterns without requiring direct confrontation. This isn't just metaphorical. Neuroscience demonstrates that creative engagement activates brain regions associated with possibility and potential, while simultaneously deactivating areas linked to self-criticism and limitation. This approach often feels counterintuitive because your instinct when facing negative thoughts is to combat them directly. You might try to argue with your inner critic, suppress anxious projections, or force yourself to think positive. But just as trying to scoop away darkness proves futile, these direct resistance strategies often increase the very patterns you're trying to eliminate. The key lies in understanding that your mind cannot simultaneously hold limitation and creation. When you're genuinely engaged in creative activity, whether solving a problem, expressing artistically, or building something new, limiting thoughts naturally fade into the background, not because you've defeated them, but because you've created something more compelling for your mind to engage with. Different forms of creative response interrupt different types of negative patterns. Artistic expression naturally disrupts emotional rumination by providing an alternative channel for emotional energy. Problem-solving engagement naturally challenges limiting beliefs about capability by demonstrating your capacity for generating solutions. Connection with others dissolves thoughts of isolation by creating genuine experiences of belonging. Consider how a river naturally changes course when a new channel appears. Water doesn't fight against its old path, but simply flows where resistance is lowest. Your mind follows similar principles, naturally flowing toward engaging alternatives when they become available. This reveals that limitation persists, not because of its inherent power, but because of the absence of compelling alternatives. Your mind, like nature, abhors a vacuum and will fill empty mental space with familiar patterns unless something more engaging is offered. Current neuroscience supports this understanding. When you engage in creative activities, your brain's default mode network, associated with self-referential thinking and rumination, becomes less active. Meanwhile, regions associated with focused attention and novel problem-solving light up, creating neural patterns incompatible with limiting thought cycles. This principle applies across various domains where negative thinking typically occurs. Anxious projection naturally dissolves when engaged with curiosity questions that direct mental energy toward genuine exploration. Defeatist thinking loses its grip when actively generating possibility scenarios that expand perceived options. Comparative judgment fades when attention shifts to appreciation practices that engage you with present value. Self-critical rumination interrupts when mental energy flows toward generative activities that demonstrate capability. The effectiveness of this approach lies in its indirect nature. Rather than creating another form of resistance, which paradoxically strengthens what you resist, creative engagement offers your mind something more compelling to focus on. It's the difference between trying to stop thinking about something, which typically intensifies that thought, and becoming so absorbed in an engaging activity that limiting thoughts naturally fade from awareness. Understanding this principle transforms how you approach negative thinking patterns. Instead of struggling against limitation, you learn to recognize it as a signal to engage creatively. Each limiting thought becomes an invitation to generate something new, whether that's a fresh perspective, an innovative solution, or a creative expression. This shift from resistance to creation fundamentally alters your relationship with limiting thoughts. Rather than viewing them as enemies to be defeated, you begin to see them as signals indicating where creative energy wants to flow. The question becomes not, how do I stop these thoughts? But, what can I create here that would naturally displace this limitation? Your mind's natural tendency to focus on problems transforms into an opportunity for innovation. When self-doubt whispers that you're not ready, you respond by designing small experiments that build confidence. When fear suggests retreat, you craft solutions that expand your comfort zone inch by inch. In this way, every limiting thought becomes raw material for growth, not through force or denial, but through the natural displacement that occurs when something more compelling takes root in your awareness. Chapter 13. The Observer Self. Imagine being so immersed in a movie that you believe it's your reality, experiencing every emotion as if the events were happening to you. Your heart races during chase scenes, tears flow during moments of loss, and tension grips your body during conflicts. Then gradually, you become aware of the theater seat beneath you, the screen before you, and the simple fact that you're watching images projected on a surface. While the movie continues playing, your relationship to it fundamentally transforms. You can still engage with the story, but you're no longer controlled by it. This shift mirrors the profound transformation available in your relationship with negative thinking. Just as you can become so absorbed in a film that you temporarily forget you're watching one, you've likely become so identified with your thoughts that you've forgotten your capacity to observe them. This complete identification makes negative thinking feel like absolute reality rather than mental activity occurring within your awareness. Throughout history, contemplative traditions have recognized this fundamental human capacity to witness mental content without becoming entangled in it. Modern psychology, particularly mindfulness-based approaches, has validated this ancient understanding through research, demonstrating how developing the observer perspective creates psychological flexibility and emotional resilience. When you're completely identified with thoughts, negative thinking exerts tremendous power because it feels like reality itself, rather than one perspective among many. Each anxious projection seems to reveal genuine danger. Each self-critical thought appears to expose true inadequacy, and each limiting belief presents itself as an unchangeable fact about life. However, just as becoming aware of watching a movie transforms your relationship with the content, recognizing thoughts as events in awareness rather than absolute truth fundamentally changes your experience of negative thinking. Think of consciousness as a vast sky in which thoughts appear like clouds. The sky itself remains unchanged regardless of whether clouds are stormy or peaceful, just as your essential awareness remains constant despite varying mental content. This unchanging witness represents your observer self, the aspect of consciousness that can recognize thoughts without becoming absorbed in them. From this perspective, negative thinking loses its controlling power. Rather than experiencing limiting thoughts as absolute truth requiring belief or resistance, you recognize them as temporary mental events arising in the space of awareness. This doesn't mean negative thoughts disappear, just as becoming aware of watching a movie doesn't make the film stop playing, but their impact fundamentally changes when witnessed from this broader perspective. Consider how a mountain provides perspective on the landscape below. From ground level, trees might seem like an impenetrable forest, but from the mountain's height, you see clearings, paths, and the forest's actual boundaries. Similarly, the observer perspective reveals spaces between thoughts and pathways through limiting patterns that remain invisible when completely identified with mental content. The key to cultivating this perspective lies in recognizing that you are not your thoughts, but the awareness in which they occur. This isn't merely a philosophical distinction. It's a direct experiential recognition that transforms your relationship with negative thinking. Just as you can watch a sunset without becoming the sunset, you can witness negative thoughts without becoming them. The observer self exists as your birthright. It's not something to create, but to uncover and strengthen through practice. Like a muscle that develops through exercise, your capacity to witness thoughts without identification grows stronger through consistent attention. This doesn't require fighting against negative thinking or forcing yourself to be positive. Instead, it involves developing stable attention that can rest in awareness itself while allowing mental content to arise and pass naturally. Through the lens of the observer self, negative thinking transforms from an overwhelming reality into a temporary experience within your broader awareness. This shift doesn't eliminate challenges, but fundamentally changes your relationship with them, creating space for new possibilities to emerge. You gain the profound ability to hold difficult thoughts and emotions at a slight distance, neither pushing them away nor becoming consumed by them. What once felt like an inescapable prison of negativity reveals itself as passing weather in the vast sky of your consciousness. This newfound perspective allows you to navigate life's storms without losing sight of the unchanging clarity that lies beyond them. Chapter 14: The Wisdom of Uncertainty. Consider two chess players facing the same complex position. The novice sees only one possible move and feels paralyzed by anxiety about whether it's correct. The master simultaneously holds multiple possibilities in mind, remaining flexible and creative despite the complexity. This fundamental difference in relationship to uncertainty determines not just their experience of chess, but their capacity for growth and innovation. The paradox of uncertainty lies at the heart of mental liberation. While your mind naturally seeks the comfort of certainty, this very desire creates rigid limitations that prevent you from accessing the full range of possibilities available in any situation. The illusion of certainty feels safe, but actually constrains your perception, creativity, and potential. Research in psychological resilience consistently shows that tolerance for uncertainty correlates strongly with life satisfaction, creative achievement, and emotional well-being. Those who can remain comfortable with not knowing demonstrate greater flexibility in problem-solving, more authentic relationships, and higher levels of personal growth. Conversely, individuals with low uncertainty tolerance often exhibit increased anxiety, dogmatic thinking, and resistance to change. Our culture frequently reinforces this limitation by rewarding quick answers over thoughtful exploration, confident assertions over genuine curiosity. The pressure to know pushes many toward premature conclusions and rigid perspectives that provide an illusion of security while severely limiting potential. This dynamic appears across all domains of life, in relationships where assumptions prevent genuine discovery, in creative work where formulas stifle innovation, and in personal growth where fixed identity blocks evolution. The liberation comes in recognizing that certainty isn't a reflection of reality but a psychological state. The feeling of knowing often reveals more about personality and conditioning than actual knowledge. This insight opens the possibility of holding knowledge differently, lightly rather than rigidly, provisionally rather than absolutely. Consider how certainty manifests as limitations in your own experience. Notice how often the phrase "I know" closes you off from new perspectives. Observe how the need to be right creates tension in relationships and resistance to growth. Recognize how the fear of uncertainty drives you toward familiar but limiting patterns rather than extensive possibilities. Developing comfort with uncertainty requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to not knowing. Rather than experiencing uncertainty as a problem to be solved, you can learn to recognize it as a space of possibility waiting to be explored. This shift transforms the anxiety of uncertainty into the excitement of discovery. The practice of provisional thinking offers one pathway into this transformation. Instead of holding conclusions as absolute facts, you learn to treat them as working hypotheses, open to revision. This maintains intellectual humility while allowing you to function effectively in the world. Rather than saying, "I know," you might say, "Based on current evidence, it appears." This simple shift creates space for new information and perspectives. Paradoxical thinking provides another approach by deliberately exploring seemingly contradictory viewpoints. Rather than rushing to resolve ambiguity, you learn to find value in holding multiple perspectives simultaneously. This capacity for cognitive complexity correlates strongly with emotional intelligence and leadership effectiveness. The key lies in progressively expanding your comfort with uncertainty through structured practice. Begin with small ambiguities where the stakes feel manageable. Notice your automatic tendency to seek immediate certainty. Practice pausing in the space of not knowing, allowing multiple possibilities to emerge before moving toward conclusions. As your capacity grows, gradually apply this approach to more significant areas of life. Notice how relationships deepen when you remain curious rather than assuming you know others' motivations. Observe how creative work flows more freely when you release rigid expectations about outcomes. Experience how personal growth accelerates when you hold your identity as an evolving possibility rather than a fixed certainty. The path of uncertainty ultimately leads to greater psychological freedom. When you no longer need situations to be certain to feel secure, you access a deeper stability based on trust in your capacity to respond creatively to whatever emerges. This internal security, paradoxically, comes from embracing rather than resisting uncertainty. As you learn to dance with the unknown, you discover an unshakable confidence that transcends external circumstances. Your power no longer depends on controlling outcomes, but flows from knowing you can navigate any situation with grace and wisdom. What once felt threatening now becomes an invitation to grow, to discover new dimensions of your capabilities. This is true liberation, not the absence of uncertainty, but the profound realization that uncertainty itself is the doorway to your greatest potential. Chapter 15: The Perspective Shift. Building on the previous chapters, I'll expand on the perspective-shifting concept while maintaining the established tone and style, targeting over 1,000 words. The ceiling has always been there, waiting to be noticed. Yet how often do we remain fixated on conventional exits, exhausting ourselves against locked doors while freedom hovers silently above? This fundamental truth about perspective lies at the heart of transcending limitations. What appears impossible from one angle often reveals obvious solutions from another. Consider how your perception creates your reality in each moment. When you're convinced a situation is hopeless, your mind efficiently filters out evidence of possibility. When you believe you lack the necessary capabilities, your attention gravitates toward confirming data while dismissing contradictory examples. This selective perception feels completely natural and objective. After all, you're simply seeing what's there, aren't you? But perception is never purely objective. Your mind doesn't passively record reality like a video camera. Instead, it actively constructs your experience through the lens of your current perspective. highlighting certain aspects while completely filtering out others. This is why two people can encounter the exact same situation yet have radically different experiences. This understanding opens up tremendous possibilities. If your perception creates your experience, then shifting your perspective literally transforms your reality. Not through magical thinking or denial, but through expanding what's visible and available to you in any given moment. The temporal shift represents one powerful tool for expanding perspective. When caught in the grip of limitation, your perception typically collapses into an eternal present moment, where current challenges feel permanent and defining. Intentionally viewing the situation across different time frames naturally dissolves this frozen perspective. The scale shift provides another crucial tool, allowing you to zoom between different levels of significance. When trapped in personal limitation, your perspective often becomes cramped and myopic, treating small setbacks as devastating failures. Intentionally shifting scale, considering how the situation appears from a community or global perspective, creates breathing room around personal challenges. The identity shift may be the most powerful tool of all, temporarily stepping out of your limited self-concept to access different aspects of your capabilities. Rather than remaining trapped in habitual self-doubt, you can intentionally view situations through the lens of your wisest self or most capable moments. These perspective shifts aren't mere mental gymnastics. They create tangible changes in how your brain processes information and generates possibilities. Neuroscience reveals that different perspectives actually activate different neural networks, accessing capabilities that remain dormant when stuck in limiting viewpoints. The key lies in developing genuine cognitive flexibility rather than forcing positive thinking. Just as a kaleidoscope creates entirely new patterns with a slight adjustment, small shifts in perspective can transform how you perceive and respond to limitations. This isn't about denying challenges, but about expanding your perceptual range to include previously invisible possibilities. Perspective shifting requires practice to overcome the mind's natural tendency toward perceptual rigidity, especially during stress. The key is developing this capacity during relatively calm periods, so it becomes available when you need it most. Regular exploration of different viewpoints builds general cognitive flexibility that serves as a foundation for specific perspective shifts when facing limitations. Think of perspective shifting as intentionally adjusting the lens through which you view reality. Just as a camera lens can zoom in for detail or out for context, your mental lens can be adjusted to reveal different aspects of any situation. The limitation you perceive may be real from your current perspective while simultaneously containing possibilities visible only from other angles. This returns us to the opening metaphor. Sometimes liberation requires looking in unexpected directions rather than struggling harder against apparent barriers. The ceiling has always been open, but noticing it requires lifting your gaze from the conventional exits that have absorbed your attention. As you develop this capacity for flexible perspective, you'll discover that many limitations exist primarily as fixed viewpoints rather than objective reality. What appears as an impenetrable wall from one angle often reveals doorways from another. The key is remembering to look. This shift transforms your relationship with obstacles. Suddenly, they become invitations to explore rather than barriers to overcome. Each challenge presents an opportunity to practice this perceptual agility, revealing possibilities that were always present but previously invisible to your habitual way of seeing. The walls that once seemed to define your boundaries become mere suggestions, temporary landmarks in a landscape rich with alternate paths. Chapter 16, The Choice Point. Standing at the crossroads of limitation and possibility, you face a fundamental choice that appears in countless moments throughout your life. One path stretches before you, well-worn and familiar, the automatic patterns of negative thinking that have shaped your experience thus far. The other path, less traveled and somewhat mysterious, opens toward expansive vistas of potential that exist beyond habitual limitation. This choice point perfectly illustrates the transformative power of conscious decision-making in breaking free from mental constraints. Most of what you consider choices are actually automatic reactions based on past conditioning. Your brain, designed for efficiency, naturally follows established neural pathways, patterns of thinking and responding that require minimal energy and conscious attention. These mental habits, formed through repetition and reinforcement, create a path of least resistance that your thoughts automatically follow, unless interrupted by conscious awareness. Neuroscience reveals why making different choices feels challenging. Habitual thinking activates well-established neural networks that process information quickly and automatically. In contrast, conscious choice requires engagement of the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center responsible for overriding automatic responses. This difference explains why choosing new responses requires more energy and feels less natural than falling into familiar patterns. This challenge becomes most apparent in triggering situations, moments when stress, pressure, or emotional intensity amplify the pull toward habitual responses. Precisely when liberated thinking would prove most valuable, your brain's tendency toward automatic processing becomes strongest. Understanding this dynamic helps explain why breaking free from limitation requires more than just good intentions. It demands a fundamental shift in how you approach the moment of choice. Choice manifests differently across various domains of limitation. Sometimes, liberation requires choosing different interpretations of the same situation, seeing opportunity where you habitually perceive threat, or recognizing learning potential within apparent failure. Other times, freedom comes through choosing where to direct attention, focusing on evidence of capability rather than limitation, or engaging with present reality rather than projected fears. Still other situations call for choosing different responses to familiar perceptions, responding to criticism with curiosity rather than defensiveness, or meeting uncertainty with exploration rather than retreat. The brain's natural tendency toward efficiency means these choices never become completely effortless. Liberation isn't found in eliminating the pull of habit, but in strengthening your capacity to choose differently despite that pull. This understanding reveals a profound truth. Freedom exists not in controlling circumstances, but in choosing your response to whatever occurs. Even in situations that cannot be changed, you retain the power to choose your interpretation and response. Developing this capacity for conscious choice requires specific training. Pause practice creates vital space between stimulus and response, moments where automatic reactions can be interrupted and alternatives considered. Option generation expands your perception of possibilities beyond habitual patterns, preventing the tunnel vision that makes limitation feel inevitable. Implementation intentions prepare specific choice points for predictable triggers, reducing the cognitive load required for choosing differently in challenging moments. Through consistent practice, you develop increasing awareness of the choice points that appear throughout your day, moments where habitual limitation can be replaced with conscious alternatives. Each of these moments, however small, represents an opportunity to step beyond the familiar path of negative thinking onto the less traveled road of possibility. While this path may feel uncertain or uncomfortable initially, It leads toward the expansive territory of liberation that exists beyond your current mental constraints. The power to choose differently exists in every moment, though your habitual patterns may obscure this truth. By developing your capacity for conscious choice through dedicated practice, you strengthen your ability to recognize and act upon these opportunities for liberation. Each conscious choice, no matter how small, contributes to rewiring your brain's automatic responses, gradually transforming limitation from an inevitable reality into simply one option among many. Chapter 17. The Ripple Effect. The power of a single transformation ripples outward in ways we rarely anticipate. Like a stone dropped into still water, when you break free from a limiting pattern, the impact creates expanding circles that eventually touch every shore of your life and beyond. This natural law of influence means that your internal work carries significance far beyond personal growth. It becomes a catalyst for collective liberation. Consider how mental patterns spread through social networks with the same inevitability as ripples through water. Research in social contagion demonstrates that attitudes, beliefs, and emotional states move through communities like invisible currents, subtly shaping the possibilities others perceive. When you shift from limitation to liberation in your own mind, you automatically influence the mental environment around you. This understanding brings both opportunity and responsibility. Your journey beyond limitation isn't merely personal development, it's a contribution to collective consciousness. Each time you challenge a limiting belief, interrupt a negative pattern, or choose possibility over constraint, you demonstrate what's possible for others. You become living proof that the walls of limitation can be transcended. This ripple effect operates through multiple channels simultaneously. Most directly, your transformed perspective changes how you interact with others. Where you once might have reinforced limiting beliefs through commiseration or agreement, you now hold space for greater possibility. Your questions open new angles of consideration. Your responses invite deeper exploration rather than automatic acceptance of constraints. More subtly, but perhaps more powerfully, your own liberation changes the energetic quality you bring to every interaction. Others sense the expanded field of possibility you inhabit, even if they can't name what's different. Your presence itself becomes an invitation to question long-held limitations. Through modeling different possibilities, you create natural permission for others to explore beyond their perceived constraints. When you respond to challenges with creativity rather than resignation, navigate uncertainty with curiosity rather than fear, or meet setbacks with resilience rather than defeat, you demonstrate alternatives to habitual limitation. This influence extends through organizations and communities. As you embody different ways of thinking and being, you naturally challenge limiting patterns in larger systems. Your questions spark new conversations. Your examples inspire different approaches. Your transformed perspective illuminates blind spots in collective assumptions. Research shows that these ripples move through at least 3 degrees of separation. Your liberation influences not only those you directly interact with, but their connections and beyond. Like a stone creating expanding circles in water, your internal shifts generate waves of possibility that travel far beyond your immediate sphere. This understanding invites a shift in how you view personal transformation. Rather than seeing your growth as a private journey, recognize it as a social act with far-reaching implications. Your work to transcend limitation becomes a gift to the collective, whether intended or not. The key to consciously amplifying this positive influence lies not in trying to change others, but in authentically sharing your own journey. By being vulnerable about your challenges and breakthroughs, you create genuine connections that allow natural transmission of insights. By offering your discoveries as possibilities rather than prescriptions, you invite others to explore rather than impose. This ripple effect gains power through recognition of subtle opportunities. Sometimes it's asking a question that opens a new perspective. Sometimes it's sharing a tool that proved helpful in your own journey. Sometimes it's simply demonstrating through your presence that another way is possible. Your transformed relationship with limitation naturally creates expanding circles of influence. Like that stone dropping into still water, your internal shifts generate ripples that eventually touch every shore. This understanding adds deeper purpose to personal transformation. Your liberation becomes a catalyst for collective evolution. Through conscious engagement with this ripple effect, you multiply the impact of your growth. Each limitation you transcend creates possibility not only for yourself, but for an expanding network of others. Your journey beyond mental constraints becomes a gift that keeps giving, creating waves of liberation that extend far beyond your individual experience. This is how lasting change moves through human systems, not through force or demand, but through the natural influence of transformed consciousness rippling outward. Your work to break free from limitations isn't just about personal freedom. It's about contributing to the liberation of human potential itself. When you transcend a mental barrier, you demonstrate what's possible to everyone watching. Your transformation becomes a living example that inspires others to question their own perceived constraints. In this way, personal growth takes on profound meaning beyond individual achievement. It becomes a catalyst for collective evolution, creating waves of possibility that touch countless lives. Your journey beyond limitation isn't just changing your story. It's helping rewrite the human story of what's possible. Chapter 18: The Ongoing Journey. The chapter opens with the powerful metaphor of a spiral staircase where each revolution brings you to a similar but higher vantage point. From this elevated perspective, you encounter familiar territories of challenge, but now with expanded awareness and deeper capacity. This image crystallizes a profound truth about the journey beyond limitation. It isn't a linear path to some final destination, but rather an evolving process of continuous expansion throughout life. Moving beyond negative thinking patterns isn't about reaching a perfect state where limitation no longer exists. Instead, it's about developing an increasingly sophisticated relationship with the limitations that naturally arise as you grow. Each level of awareness reveals more subtle forms of limitation, creating endless opportunities for expansion rather than a final achievement to reach. What becomes possible when you embrace liberation as an ongoing practice rather than a one-time breakthrough is transformative. This orientation creates sustainable growth that continues long after initial insights, preventing the common pattern of temporary elevation followed by unconscious regression. When you understand that each breakthrough reveals new territories for exploration rather than a final destination, the journey itself becomes the reward. The progression follows natural cycles of growth, much like the seasons in nature. Early stages often involve dramatic insights and visible changes, limiting beliefs falling away like autumn leaves, making space for new growth. Later stages bring more subtle refinements and deeper integration, like the barely perceptible daily growth of a mighty tree that nevertheless produces profound transformation over time. This cyclical nature requires different approaches at different stages. Initial breakthroughs might come through dramatic perspective shifts or powerful pattern interruptions, But sustaining growth demands installing new practices and support systems that maintain awareness when the initial motivation naturally wanes. Without these ongoing practices, it's easy to fall back into familiar patterns, especially under the pressures of daily life. The ultimate mastery isn't found in permanently transcending all limitations, an impossible and unnecessary goal. True mastery lies in developing an increasingly skillful relationship with limitations as they arise. It's about recognizing limiting patterns more quickly, transforming them more gracefully, and maintaining perspective even in challenging moments. This understanding transforms how you approach the journey. Instead of striving for a mythical state of permanent liberation, you develop practical tools for ongoing growth. Community connections that provide support and reflection, regular reassessment practices that identify emerging areas for growth, celebration rituals that acknowledge progress, and teaching opportunities that deepen understanding through sharing with others. The spiral nature of growth means you'll likely encounter similar challenges repeatedly, but each time from a higher vantage point. What once felt like insurmountable obstacles become familiar territories for practicing expanded awareness. Former limitations transform into opportunities for demonstrating new capabilities. Your relationship with limitation itself evolves. Rather than seeing limitations as problems to eliminate, they become valuable indicators pointing toward areas ripe for growth. Each limitation encountered becomes a doorway to new possibility, an invitation to spiral up to another level of awareness and capability. This shift in orientation, from seeking permanent transcendence to embracing ongoing evolution, creates sustainable transformation that continues long after any initial breakthroughs. It prevents the common pattern of dramatic insight followed by gradual regression, replacing it with steady, sustainable growth that builds upon itself over time. The journey beyond limitation thus becomes a lifelong practice of expanding awareness and capability rather than a destination to reach. Each revolution of the spiral staircase brings new insights, deeper understanding, and increased capacity to navigate life's challenges with grace and wisdom. This perspective transforms how you measure progress. Rather than seeking some final state of perfection, you learn to recognize and celebrate the subtle signs of growth. Increased resilience in facing challenges, quicker recovery from limiting patterns, greater capacity to support others in their journey. Success isn't found in eliminating all limitations, but in developing an increasingly skillful relationship with whatever arises. You begin to notice the small victories that once passed unrecognized, moments when you pause before reacting, instances where you choose growth over comfort, situations where your expanded perspective allows you to navigate complexity with newfound grace. Your journey becomes less about reaching an imagined destination and more about deepening your engagement with life itself, transforming each obstacle into an opportunity for greater understanding and capability. Conclusion. Throughout this transformative journey, you've traversed the territory from unconscious limitation to conscious liberation. What began as an exploration of the invisible architecture of negative thinking has evolved into a profound understanding of your inherent capacity for freedom. The KILL framework has revealed itself not just as a methodology, but as a natural cycle of expanding awareness. Each deepening of knowledge enhances your ability to interrupt limiting patterns. Successful interruption leads to experiences of liberation, and moments of liberation inspire you to create a legacy that elevates those around you. This journey has shown that negative thinking isn't a fixed reality, but a learned perception that can be unlearned. through understanding the mechanics of mental limitation, how thoughts crystallize into beliefs, how beliefs shape experience, and how experience seems to confirm those beliefs. You've discovered your power to interrupt this cycle at any point. The metaphors we've explored, from the unlocked doors you thought were sealed, to the bird that needed only to recognize its capacity for flight, now take on deeper meaning through your transformed understanding. Yet this conclusion isn't an ending, but a beginning. The journey beyond limitation never truly concludes. Each new level of awareness reveals increasingly subtle forms of constraint, creating endless opportunities for growth. This isn't a shortcoming, but a gift, offering continuous invitation to expand into greater expressions of your potential. You now understand that transformation isn't about becoming someone new, but about removing the artificial constraints that have prevented you from fully expressing who you already are. The tools and insights you've gained aren't temporary techniques, but fundamental shifts in how you perceive yourself and your possibilities. Moving forward, you'll find that moments of limitation still arise. This is natural and expected. But now you have the awareness to recognize them as invitations to expand rather than confirmations of constraint. Each challenging situation becomes an opportunity to practice presence, to shift perspective, to choose liberation over habitual reaction. Remember that your transformed relationship with limitation creates ripples far beyond your personal experience. As you embody expanded possibilities, you naturally inspire others to question their own constraints. Your journey of liberation becomes a gift not just to yourself, but to everyone your life touches. You're equipped now, not with a finite set of techniques, but with a fundamental understanding of how limitation operates and how freedom is always available. This understanding will continue to deepen and evolve as you apply it in new situations, revealing fresh insights and possibilities you couldn't have imagined at the start. The question was never whether you could overcome your limitations. The real revelation has been discovering that those limitations were never truly yours to begin with. They were borrowed beliefs, temporary perspectives, artificial boundaries that seemed solid only because they hadn't been questioned. This isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter where you move through life with expanding awareness, growing resilience, and deepening trust in your capacity to transform limitation into opportunity. The journey continues, but now you walk it with clear eyes and an open heart, knowing that each step creates new possibilities, not just for yourself, but for all whose lives you touch. Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Now go out there and create the life you deserve.